Media fact-checker. Arson attack on Jewish ambulances in London's Golders Green treated as antisemitic hate crime. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 4 ambulances belonging to Hatzola Northwest, a Jewish community ambulance service, were set on fire in Golders Green, London, on Monday around 1:45 a.m. local time. The explosions were caused by oxygen tanks gas canisters on board the ambulances, breaking windows in an adjacent block of flats. Police, Metropolitan Police, are treating the incident as an anti-Semitic hate crime and have launched an investigation. 3 suspects were seen in CCTV footage pouring gasoline on the ambulances before leaving the scene. Police believe at least 3 people were involved. No injuries were reported, but nearby houses were evacuated as a precaution. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian's David Brown's opinion piece frames the attack as part of a global rise in antisemitism tied to the Israel-Palestine conflict, while ABC and other sources focus solely on the local incident without broader geopolitical context. ABC and news.com.au report that police have not declared the incident a terror attack, but ABC also notes a claim of responsibility by a group with potential links to Iran without further confirmation from other sources. The Guardian's Sam Adler and Damon Horf emphasize the attack's symbolic targeting of the Jewish community, while ABC and news.com.au frame it as an attack on emergency services more broadly. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. North Korea's cyber espionage and fraud operation targeting Australian firms via fake IT jobs. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. North Korea's regime is using an army of thousands of undercover operatives posing as remote IT workers to infiltrate Western companies, with a focus on Australia. The United Nations estimates North Korea's annual revenue from this operation is approximately $800 million. ASIO, Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, has identified undercover operatives targeting Australian firms to funnel salaries back to North Korea's weapons program. Major Australian banks, including NAB, have been infiltrated by North Korean agents, who were later discovered and sacked. The Australian Federal Police's cyber threat teams are assessing intelligence that North Korean agents are already on shore, including a suspected intermediary who is a Melbourne University alumnus. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the 2 sources. Both articles are nearly identical in content and reporting. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Arrests and investigation into alleged Sydney kidnapping and murder of Chris Baghsarian. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Chris Baghsarian, an 85-year-old grandfather, was allegedly kidnapped from his North Ryde home on the 13th of February in a case of mistaken identity. Baghsarian's body was found near a golf club in Pitt Town on the 24th of February, 11 days after his disappearance. 2 men, Gerard Andrews, 29, and Daniel Stevens, 24, were charged in February with murder and kidnapping with intent to ransom or cause grievous bodily harm. Police executed a search warrant at a Seven Hills address on the 21st of March, arresting a 23-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman. The man and woman were taken to Riverstone and Blacktown police stations to assist with inquiries. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian does not mention the seizure of firearms or drugs during the search, while News Corp Australia explicitly reports their discovery. ABC states the intended target was a relative of Dimitri Stepanyan, but this detail is not mentioned in The Guardian or News Corp Australia. News Corp Australia claims the man was clad in nothing but his underwear during arrest, a detail not present in The Guardian or ABC. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Northern Territory flooding from ex-tropical Cyclone Narelle and ongoing riverine impacts. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Ex-tropical cyclone Narelle dumped over 200 millimeters of rain on Adelaide River overnight, causing major flooding and forcing 4 residents to self-evacuate, Articles 3, 4. The Katherine River peaked just below the 17.5 m major flood level at Katherine Bridge on Thursday morning, avoiding the 19.2 m peak from earlier this month, Articles 4, 5, 6. The BOM forecast the Katherine River to reach the major flood level of 17.5 m by Wednesday afternoon, Articles 2, 3, 5. Adelaide River experienced major flooding with water levels peaking near 12.70 m on Monday morning, Articles 3, 4. The Stewart Highway was cut by floodwater north of Adelaide River, with multiple sections damaged this month, Articles 1, 4. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the Katherine River was predicted to reach the major flood level within about 24 hours, while Article 2 states the river was expected to peak below the major flood level at Katherine Bridge overnight, Article 1 vs Article 2. Article 1 mentions the Katherine River could reach the major flood level again within 24 hours, but Article 6 states the river peaked just below the major flood level on Thursday morning, Article 1 vs Article 6. Article 2 says the Katherine River was expected to reach the minor flood level of 16 minutes later in the day on Tuesday, while Article 3 states river levels at Katherine Bridge could exceed the minor flood level of 16 m this morning, Article 2 vs Article 3. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Victorian Liberal MP Moira Deeming loses preselection for upper house seat. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Moira Deeming was dumped from the Victorian Liberal Party's upper house ticket for the November 2024 state election in a preselection vote held on Sunday the 28th of April, 2024. Dinesh Gurisetti won the top spot in the Western Metropolitan Region preselection with 39 votes, while Moira Deeming received 26 votes and Trung Law received 3 votes. Moira Deeming was expelled from the Liberal Party in 2023 after threatening defamation action against then-leader John Pesutto, then reinstated after Pesutto lost the leadership in late 2024. Moira Deeming won a defamation case against John Pesutto in December 2024, with the court ruling he defamed her by implying she associated with neo-Nazis. Moira Deeming attended the 2023 Let Women Speak rally gatecrashed by neo-Nazis, condemned the neo-Nazis but defended her participation. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Moira Deeming received 26 votes, while The Guardian does not specify her vote count but implies it was lower than 39. The Guardian states Moira Deeming's supporters allege irregularities in the delegate selection process, but ABC does not mention this in detail. The Guardian says Moira Deeming's supporters insist she was not contemplating a move to One Nation, while The Age reports One Nation is open to discussions with her. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's medal haul at the 2024 World Athletics Indoor Championships in Poland. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jessica Hull won silver in the women's 1,500 meter at the World Athletics Indoor Championships in Torun, Poland, with a time of 3 minutes and 59.45 seconds, breaking the Australian and Oceanian indoor record, previously 4 minutes and 1.19 seconds. Georgia Hunter-Bell of Great Britain won gold in the women's 1,500 meter with a 2026 world best time of 3 minutes and 58.53 seconds, finishing 0.92 seconds ahead of Hull. Adam Spencer won bronze in the men's 1,500 meter with a time of 3 minutes and 40.26 seconds after starting in 5th place and finishing stronger in the final stretch. Australia won a total of 5 medals, 2 silver, 3 bronze, across 3 days at the championships in Torun, Poland. Peter Boll set a new Oceanian record in the 800m with a time of 1 minute and 45.14 seconds but did not win a medal, finishing behind Cooper Lutkenhouse of the US. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Drug-affected driver sentenced for hitting schoolboys, sues government over arrest. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Taylor Hazel, 32, pleaded guilty to 2 counts of culpable driving causing grievous bodily harm in March 2023 outside St Edmunds College, Canberra. Hazel was driving a stolen green Commodore, NSW registered, with an 8-year-old girl inside when he hit 2 schoolboys, aged 14 and 15, on Canberra Avenue, Griffith. Hazel later crashed the car outside St Christopher's Cathedral in Manuka after the incident, where he was arrested by AFP officers. Bodycam footage shows Hazel handcuffed and telling officers, "Now man, I'm done," before being forcibly slammed to the ground by AFP tactical response team members. An AFP investigation found the officers' conduct breached professional standards, and prosecutors accepted the force used was unlawful. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Victorian public school teachers staging first strike in 13 years over pay and conditions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australian Education Union, AEU, is leading a 24-hour strike by approximately 30,000 Victorian public school teachers, principals, and education support staff on Tuesday, 2024. The Fair Work Commission approved the strike after 98% of AEU members voted in favour, citing low pay and excessive workloads as key grievances. The AEU is seeking a 35% pay rise over 4 years, smaller class sizes, and improved mental health and classroom support, while the government offered an 18.5% pay increase, 8% for teachers, 4% for staff, in April 2024, followed by 3% annual rises. Up to 500 public schools in Victoria are expected to be closed or significantly disrupted due to the strike, with many offering limited supervision for students. Premier Jacinta Allen urged teachers not to strike, calling the action disruptive for families and arguing the government's offer was strong. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC report that principals are participating in the strike and advising parents to keep children of emergency workers home, while the Age states principals are planning to participate in the rally, but supervision will only be available for emergency workers by prior arrangement. The Guardian and ABC mention that some Melbourne schools saw few children arrive on Tuesday morning despite the Education Department insisting schools would remain open, but Newscomau does not mention this specific observation. The Guardian and ABC emphasise that Catholic and independent schools are operating normally, while The Age does not explicitly mention this detail. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Former NRL player Wendell Sailor's dismissed assault charges due to mental health concerns. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Wendell Sailor was charged with common assault and other offences in 2024 after 2 alleged drunken rampages at Sydney bars, Pappy's Bar, Erskine St, and Wollongong, Illawarra Master Builders Club. Sailor pleaded guilty to 3 offences relating to the 2 incidents, including remaining in the vicinity of a licensed premises, stalking intimidation, and resisting arrest. Magistrate Jennifer Atkinson dismissed all charges under Section 14 of the Mental Health Act, citing Sailor's major depressive disorder and excessive alcohol use as a byproduct of his disorder. Sailor was discharged into the care of his GP to undergo treatment for mental health and alcohol issues, with a detailed health plan accepted by the court. Sailor has no prior criminal record before the 2 incidents. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states charges were dismissed under mental health grounds for both incidents simultaneously, while Newscomau initially reported Sailor would learn his fate over the incidents later this month before later confirming all charges were dismissed. ABC does not mention the number of police officers involved in Sailor's arrest, while Newscomore explicitly states it took 9 officers to arrest him in Wollongong. ABC does not detail Sailor's aggressive verbal exchanges with police or bar staff, while Newscomore includes his exact profanity-laced remarks, F***King call the cops and see what happens, and claims of racial motivation. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Qantas Jetstar reduces NZ flights due to rising jet fuel prices amid global fuel crisis. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jetstar, Qantas subsidiary, is reducing 12% of flights between Auckland, Sydney and Auckland, Brisbane routes from May due to rising jet fuel prices. Jetstar cited the Middle East conflict as a direct cause of soaring jet fuel prices affecting flight schedules. Air New Zealand also reduced 5% of its domestic international flights between March 16 and May 3 due to unprecedented volatility in jet fuel prices. Australia's fuel crisis includes 8% of service stations nationwide, 560+ stations, without diesel or petrol as of the reporting period. Energy Minister Chris Bowen lowered the technical threshold for diesel, flashpoint, from 61.5C to 60.5C to increase supply options. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Jetstar's 12% cut applies to Auckland, Sydney, Brisbane routes and some NZ domestic flights, while Newscomau specifies 55+ flights cut including Sydney Air Queenstown, via Melbourne, but does not quantify the 12% figure for those routes. Newscomau states 8% of Australian service stations lack fuel, 560+ stations, but ABC does not provide a total station count, only mentions 164 24/17 in NSW and 162 16/27 in Victoria. ABC notes Air New Zealand's 5% cut is for lower demand or off-peak times, while Newscomau omits this detail. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Death of married at first sight expert Mel Schilling from bowel cancer at 54. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Mel Schilling died on Tuesday, aged 54, from colon cancer that had metastasized to her brain. Schilling was diagnosed with colon cancer in December 2023, with a 5 cm tumor removed via surgery. In February 2024, a routine scan revealed small nodules in her lungs indicating metastasis. Schilling underwent 16 rounds of chemotherapy over 2 years before announcing her terminal diagnosis in March 2026. She revealed her cancer had spread to the left side of her brain in March 2026, with doctors stating no further treatment was possible. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC mentioned Schilling's cancer spread to her brain in March 2026, but ABC2 states she experienced blinding headaches over Christmas 2025 and was diagnosed terminal then. Newscomau states Schilling's mental health struggles were kept private, while ABC2 implies she openly discussed her mental health challenges post-diagnosis. SMH mentions Schilling was eligible for a clinical trial starting March 2026, which is not referenced in any other source. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Formula 1 2026 Japanese Grand Prix qualifying and race setup at Suzuka Circuit. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Kimi Antonelli secured pole position for the Japanese Grand Prix with a time of 1 minute and 28.778 seconds, 0.298 seconds ahead of teammate George Russell, who started second. Mercedes locked out the front row for the third consecutive race in 2026, with Antonelli and Russell on pole and second respectively. Oscar Piastri qualified third for McLaren, 0.354 seconds behind Antonelli, while Charles Leclerc took fourth for Ferrari. Max Verstappen failed to qualify for Q3 and started 11th, describing his Red Bull car as undrivable during qualifying. The Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka Circuit was scheduled to start at 2:10 p.m. local time, 6:10 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, with a 10-minute delay due to barrier damage in a support race. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian Article 1 mentions a 10-minute delay due to barrier damage in a support race, but this detail is not repeated in any other source. Guardian Article 2 states that Verstappen was 11th in qualifying, while Guardian Article 4 states Verstappen was 10th in qualifying, with Liam Lawson 13th. Guardian Article 4 mentions Verstappen was 1.548 seconds down on Antonelli in FP3, but this specific timing is not referenced in other sources. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement, Farmers' Criticism versus Government Support. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement was announced on Tuesday after 8 years of negotiations between Ursula von der Leyen, EU President, and Anthony Albanese, Australian PM. The agreement includes tariff-free exports for Australian wine, estimated to save $14.5 million annually by industry. Australian beef exporters will gain access to 30,600 tonnes of additional beef and 25,000 tonnes of lamb under the deal, ABC, 35,000 tonnes of beef and 31,000 tonnes of lamb, Newscomer. The agreement removes the passenger vehicle tariff, 5% tax on EU-sourced vehicles, and introduces a lower luxury car tax rate for electric vehicles. The deal opens professional recognition pathways for Australians in legal, accounting, architecture, engineering, and health services. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports the beef quota is 30,600 tonnes, while Newscomer states it is 35,000 tonnes, 700% increase. ABC claims the lamb quota is 25,000 tonnes, but Newscomer says it is 31,000 tonnes, five-fold increase. ABC states the deal offers no material change for key agricultural commodities compared to October 2023, but Newscomer omits this criticism. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian political reaction to US-Iran war and economic fallout on energy supplies. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Andrew Hastie is a senior Liberal frontbencher and Shadow Minister for Industry and Sovereign Capability. Hastie served as a Special Forces veteran and fought in the Middle East alongside American troops. Hastie stated on ABC's *Insiders*, February 2024, that the US-Iran war was a huge miscalculation by Donald Trump. Hastie criticized Trump for not consulting allies like Australia before the conflict, citing lack of lead time. Iran has continued attacking neighboring Gulf countries and blockading the Strait of Hormuz despite Trump's claims of victory. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomer states Hastie warned Australia faces a twin energy shock in oil and gas, while ABC does not explicitly mention this term but focuses on gas export levies instead. Newscomer highlights Hastie's backing of the US and Israel against Iran's murderous regime, but ABC omits this explicit endorsement in favor of economic critiques. Newscomer reports Trump's claim of obliterating Iran's nuclear program, 2023, as context, while ABC does not reference this specific claim or timeline. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Nicolás Maduro's federal court appearance in New York for narco-terrorism charges and legal funding disputes. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nicolás Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores were captured by U.S. Special Forces in Caracas on the 3rd of January, 2024 during a pre-dawn raid that reportedly killed 100 people. Maduro and Flores pleaded not guilty during their 5th of January arraignment in Manhattan Federal Court. Maduro and Flores are facing charges of narco-terrorism and drug trafficking, with allegations they spearheaded a corrupt government protecting illegal activity. prosecutors and Maduro's defense are disputing whether Venezuela's government can fund his legal defense, with OFAC initially granting then reversing a waiver. Demonstrators both for and against Maduro's capture gathered outside the Manhattan courthouse during his court appearances. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian Article 1 states OFAC reversed course on the funding waiver just 3 hours later, while OFAC later claimed it was an administrative error and corrected within days, not an immediate reversal. Guardian Article 2 describes Maduro's t-shirt as neon, while ABC does not specify the color of his shirt. Guardian Article 2 mentions Maduro slimmed down since his last court appearance, but this detail is not mentioned in the other sources. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. First NFL regular season game in Australia at MCG between Rams and 49ers. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The first NFL regular season game in Australia will be played between the Los Angeles Rams and San Francisco 49ers. The match will take place at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, MCG, on Friday, September 11, 2025, at 10:35 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. General access tickets will open on April 8, 2025, at 10 a.m. via Ticketmaster, starting at $95 for standing room and $140 for general seating. The NFL opened its Australian office in 2022 and established the NFLAC Academy on the Gold Coast. The game is expected to inject tens of millions of dollars into the Victorian economy. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the game is for the NFL opening round, while Article 2 clarifies it is a regular season game, not the first game of the season. Article 1 does not mention partner pre-sales or waitlist numbers, while Article 2 states 150,000 fans are on the waitlist and partner pre-sales open April 1st. Article 3 incorrectly refers to the game as an NRL match in its headline, while all sources confirm it is an NFL game. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Federal government urges Fair Work Commission for above-inflation minimum wage hike amid cost of living pressures. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Albanese government submitted to the Fair Work Commission's annual wage review asking for an economically sustainable real wage increase for 2.7 million minimum wage and award-reliant workers in Australia. About 2.7 million Australians, around a quarter of the workforce, are on the national minimum wage or award-reliant jobs. The current minimum wage is $175.40 per week, higher than when the Albanese government took office in 2022. The Fair Work Commission's upcoming decision will take effect from July 1, 2026. The Reserve Bank of Australia raised the official cash rate to 4.1% on March 17, 2026, marking the second consecutive hike in 2026. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the minimum wage is currently $175.40 per week, higher than in 2022, while ABC does not provide this specific figure. News Kamau does not mention specific wage increase proposals from unions or business groups, whereas ABC reports the ACTU wants 5% and ACCI wants 3.5%. News Kamau does not mention the possibility of inflation reaching 5% or the Middle East war's impact on inflation, which ABC highlights as a concern. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Daly Cherry-Evans returned to Manly Warringah at Brookvale Oval for the Roosters in 2026 NRL season. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Daly Cherry-Evans made his first appearance for the Roosters against his former club Manly Warringah Sea Eagles on the opening weekend of the 2026 NRL season. The match took place at Brookvale Oval, with heavy rain and lightning disrupting pre-game preparations and play. Manly started the season with a 0-3 record, losing all 3 games at Brookvale Oval. Cherry-Evans was booed by Manly fans during warm-ups, team introductions, and throughout the game. Manly's forward pack struggled to create territory, with Jake Trbojevic recording just 8 runs, 70 meters, across 3 games before the match. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 and 2 both state Cherry-Evans was booed throughout the game, but Article 3's live blog does not explicitly state this until later in the match, focusing initially on the game's play-by-play. Article 1 and 2 mention Cherry-Evans' combination with Sam Walker was still being ironed out, but Article 3 does not mention Walker's involvement in the game's play. Article 1 and 2 describe Cherry-Evans' performance as tight and controlled, while Article 3's live blog does not provide a detailed analysis of his performance, focusing instead on the game's events. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Democratic victory in Florida special election flips Trump-backed district. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Emily Gregory, Democrat, defeated John Maples, Republican, in Florida's 87th State House District special election on the 11th of June, 2025, winning by 2.4 percentage points, 797 votes. The district includes Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach County, Florida. John Maples was endorsed by Donald Trump and described himself as an America First patriot and financial advisor. The previous Republican incumbent, Mike Caruso, won the seat by 19 percentage points in 2024 before resigning to become Palm Beach County Clerk. Donald Trump voted via mail-in ballot in the special election despite publicly criticizing mail-in voting as mail-in cheating and fraud. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian's first article states Trump voted by mail despite criticizing the practice as mail-in cheating during an event in Tennessee this week, while the second Guardian article clarifies Trump's criticism was of universal mail-in voting and not individual accommodations. The Guardian's second article cites a Brookings Institution report on mail voting fraud, 0.000043%, but ABC does not mention this statistic or cite Brookings. The Guardian's first article mentions Gregory's win as part of a STEM wave with endorsement from 314 Action, while ABC does not reference this STEM wave narrative. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Analysis of the Mind diet's role in preventing dementia and recent genetic dietary interaction studies. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Mind diet, Mediterranean-diet intervention for neurodegenerative delay, is linked to a 19% reduced odds of developing mild cognitive impairment or dementia according to a 2019 study by Scientia professor Karin Arnsti, UNSW Aging Futures Institute. A 2024 Lancet Commission report identified 14 modifiable risk factors that could prevent or delay 45% of dementia cases, including high LDL cholesterol, 7% influence, and untreated vision loss, 2%. The Mind diet emphasizes leafy greens, nuts, berries, olive oil, poultry, fish, and limits red meat, less than 4 servings per week, and processed meats. Observational studies show people adhering most strongly to the Mind diet retain up to 20% more gray matter over 12 years, corresponding to a 2.5-year delay in brain aging, studied via brain scans. The APOE4 gene variant, present in about 1 in 4 people, increases dementia risk and was linked to slower cognitive decline in individuals with higher unprocessed meat intake, per a 2024 study. But not all outlets told the same story. Thij and ABC both report the Mind diet's benefits, but ABC notes that a small trial found no improvement in memory or thinking skills after 3 months, while Thij emphasizes the broader body of evidence supporting its benefits. Thij states that the Lancet Commission report did not include diet as a 15th factor, but ABC does not explicitly contradict this, it only notes the broader lifestyle factors accompanying the Mind diet in the Framingham study. Thij highlights that the Mind diet's benefits are supported by objective brain scan data showing 20% more gray matter retention, while ABC acknowledges that observational studies cannot prove cause and effect and that self-reported diet data is unreliable. This story was covered by ABC News, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. AFL umpire error controversy in Geelong vs Adelaide match where a free kick was incorrectly awarded. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The AFL admitted Geelong was incorrectly awarded a last disposal free kick in the fourth quarter of the match against Adelaide on Thursday night at Cardinia Park. Tom Atkins, Geelong, was involved in a contested boundary incident with Zach Taylor, Adelaide, where the ball appeared to come off Atkins' boot before he scooped it up and kicked it out of bounds. The AFL Review Centre, ARC, did not have time to intervene on the free kick decision before the ball came back into play. Geelong won the match by 8 points, 9.14, 68, to 9.6, 60. This is the fifth time in 4 seasons the AFL has admitted a late umpiring mistake went against Adelaide in close losses. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC does not mention David King's term stooged or his detailed analysis of the contested boundary incident, while The Age includes it. ABC does not reference Jason Dunstall's call for the ARC to intervene or his procedural critique, while The Age includes it. ABC does not mention the Crows' 20-point deficit recovery or the specific mention of their short break advantage, while The Age includes these details. This story was covered by ABC News and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Lachlan Kennedy defeats Gout Gout in back-to-back 200m races at Maurie Plant Meet. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Lachlan Kennedy won the 200-metre at the Maurie Plant Meet on the 8th of March, 2025 with a time of 20.38s, beating Gout Gout who finished in 20.43s under a slight headwind, -0.7. The race took place at Melbourne's Lakeside Stadium with around 9,000 to 10,000 spectators, despite rain starting just before the event. Gout Gout is 18 years old and finished his school year before becoming a full-time athlete, while Kennedy is 22 and recovered from a back injury that kept him out of the 2024 World Athletics Championships. Kennedy also won the 100-metre earlier in the evening with a time of 10.03s, setting a meet record in blustery conditions. Gout Gout stated he would focus on defending his 200m Australian title at the upcoming national championships and avoid competing in the senior 100m. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian, Article 1, states Gout's 200m time at the Queensland State Championships was 20.42s with a strong headwind, while ABC and The Age do not mention this specific time or condition for that race. The Guardian, Article 3, describes the rain as pouring just before the race, while ABC and The Age describe it as cinematic and drifting rain without specifying the intensity. The Guardian, Article 1, mentions Gout's first press conference in Melbourne was swarmed by cameras, but ABC and The Age do not reference the media attention beyond the race results. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Nepal's former PM KP Sharma Oli arrested over alleged role in deadly Gen Z protests crackdown. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. KP Sharma Oli and former Home Affairs Minister Ramesh Lekhak were arrested in Kathmandu on June 2024 over alleged involvement in the deaths of protesters during the Gen Z uprising in September 2023. 19 protesters were killed when police opened fire during the Gen Z protests in September 2023, with additional deaths reported as unrest spread nationwide the following day. The protests began in response to a social media ban and widespread public frustration over corruption and nepotism in politics. Nepal's new Prime Minister Balendra Shah, known as Balan, was sworn in less than 24 hours before the arrests, winning a landslide victory with a campaign promising justice for the killings. The arrests followed a leaked government-backed report recommending 10 years in prison for Oli, Lekhak, and the former police chief for their alleged role in the crackdown. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Oli was taken to a hospital after arrest due to kidney issues, but but SBS does not mention this detail. The Guardian states the leaked report found no effort was made to stop or control the firing, while SBS does not provide this specific allegation. The Guardian specifies the protests began in response to a social media ban, but SBS does not mention this trigger. This story was covered by The Guardian and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Liberal MP Andrew Hastie's shift toward supporting a 25% gas export tax and sovereign wealth fund proposals. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Andrew Hastie, Liberal MP and opposition spokesman for sovereign capability, is open to a 25% tax on gas profits, reportedly modelled by Treasury on request of the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet. The Greens and former Climate 200-backed Senator David Pocock have championed a 25% export tax on gas profits, with the Greens estimating it could raise $17 billion per year. Hastie referenced Norway's sovereign wealth fund, which has assets worth over $3.2 trillion, $2.2 trillion, as a model for Australia. Hastie stated multinationals don't have a social license and have had a really good run of our wealth here during an interview with The Guardian. Santos is negotiating $120 million from a single shipment of gas, as cited by Greens Senator Steph Hodgins-May. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomau does not mention budget leaks or Treasury modelling of a 25% gas profit tax, while The Guardian explicitly cites these leaks and modelling efforts. The Guardian quotes Shadow Treasurer Tim Wilson as saying new taxes would freeze investment and private jobs growth, but Newscomau does not include this specific quote or framing. Newscomau does not reference the International Energy Agency's warning about investor concerns over sudden tax changes, which The Guardian includes. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia faces fuel shortages amid diesel standard relaxation and supply disruptions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Energy Minister Chris Bowen lowered Australia's diesel standards for 6 months, reducing the flashpoint from 61.5 degrees Celsius to 60.5 degrees Celsius to increase supply options from international sources, ABC, Guardian. Hundreds of service stations across Australia are experiencing fuel shortages, with at least 164 NSW stations without diesel and 289 without at least one fuel type, ABC, Guardian. 6 fuel shipments scheduled for April were cancelled, though some were replaced by alternate sources, ABC. Chris Bowen released 20% of Australia's fuel reserve to address shortages, ABC. In Queensland, 55 stations lack diesel and 35 lack unleaded petrol, ABC, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports 164 NSW stations without diesel, while Guardian states Bowen mentioned 37 NSW stations without petrol but does not specify diesel shortages for NSW, no direct NSW diesel count in Guardian. ABC states 289 NSW stations without at least one fuel type out of 2,400, while Guardian does not provide a total NSW shortage count but cites 37 stations without petrol, inconsistent totals. Guardian claims Bowen declined to say when the government became aware of cancelled shipments, only stating it was an iterative process, while ABC specifies 6 deliveries were cancelled for April, timing ambiguity. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. ABC staff strike over rejected pay offer and conditions dispute. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. More than 1,000 ABC journalists and staff are striking for 24 hours starting at 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time on Wednesday, 11 a.m. to 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time Thursday. 60% of participating ABC staff voted no to the latest Enterprise Bargaining Agreement, EBA, pay offer, with 75 to 75.6% of the workforce voting. The rejected pay offer included a 3.5% pay rise in the first year and 3.25% in the subsequent 2 years, totaling 10% over 3 years. The offer also included a one-off $1,000 bonus for ongoing and fixed-term staff covered by the EBA, excluding casuals. ABC Managing Director Hugh Marks apologized to audiences for the strike action and acknowledged it was very unfortunate. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC sources claim the rejected pay offer was competitive with industry standards, Marks, but unions argue it is below inflation, MEAA-CPSU. The Guardian reports 75% of the total workforce voted, 75% participation, while ABC sources state 75.6% voted, with 4,500 staff total. ABC sources say the offer was 40% support, Dina Amarelli email, but The Guardian and Newscomer both cite 60% voting no, 40% yes. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Tottenham Hotspur fires interim manager Igor Tudor amid relegation crisis. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tottenham Hotspur parted ways with interim manager Igor Tudor after 7 league matches and 44 days in charge. Tudor was hired on February 14, 2024, with a contract until the end of the season. Tottenham lost 3-0 to Nottingham Forest on March 22, 2024, marking Tudor's final match in charge. Tottenham sits 1 point above relegation with 7 games remaining in the Premier League season. Tottenham's 50-year streak in the top flight is at risk of ending. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC mentions Tudor's first match was a 4-1 loss to Arsenal, while The Guardian does not specify the score of the first match but lists Arsenal as one of the early losses. ABC lists Harry Redknapp as expressing interest in the role before Tudor's departure, but The Guardian does not mention Redknapp's interest. ABC states Tudor's final match was a 3-0 home loss to Nottingham Forest ahead of the international break, while The Guardian does not specify the timing relative to the break. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's Matildas facing low-ranked teams in April 2026 FIFA Series ahead of 2027 World Cup. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Matildas will play Malawi, ranked 153, in Nairobi on April 1, 2026, as part of the FIFA Series 2026. If victorious, Australia will face the winner of India, ranked 67, versus Kenya, ranked 134, in the next match. Australia is ranked 15th in the FIFA Women's rankings, while Malawi, India, and Kenya are ranked 153, 67, and 134 respectively. Football Australia announced the April fixtures on April 1, 2026, just 17 days after the Matildas' 1-0 Asian Cup final loss to Japan. Coach Joe Montemurro stated the team needs more regular, top international competition ahead of the 2027 Women's World Cup. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian calls the April window a calamity and criticizes FA's decision-making, while ABC frames it as a necessary but limited opportunity. The Guardian suggests FA may have to call up fringe players like Kayla Morrison or Leah Davidson, but ABC does not mention this possibility. The Guardian implies the April games are unlikely to provide meaningful competitive value, while ABC states Malawi offers a worthwhile challenge. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Iran's control of Strait of Hormuz shipping during US-Israel war on Iran. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Strait of Hormuz saw a 95% drop in daily traffic, from ~138 ships day pre-war to ~5-6 ships day, since February 28, 2024, per Joint Maritime Information Center and ABC Lloyd's List. Iran has established a safe corridor near Larak Island, northern Iranian waters, for vessel transit, diverting ships from the central shipping lane, as reported by Lloyd's List and ABC. More than 20 ships have been attacked or suffered near misses in the region since the conflict began, including the Palau-flagged Skylight tanker, Indian crew deaths, per Guardian and ABC. Iran's IRGC has imposed a de facto toll booth system, with at least 2 vessels reportedly paying $2 million, £1.5 million, for transit, per Guardian and ABC, a laden Borajerdi's quote. Iran's crude oil exports averaged 1.6 million barrels per day, March 1 to 23, per Tanker Tracker's data cited by ABC and Guardian's reference to Lloyd's List. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports 100 ships exited the Gulf and 40 entered in March, totaling 138 ships for the month, while ABC states only 150 ships transited March 1 to 26, including 46 tankers. The Guardian cites Lloyd's List saying no vessels have been damaged since March 22, but ABC does not provide a specific date cutoff for attacks or damages. The Guardian mentions Iran's toll payments were made in Chinese yuan due to US-EU sanctions, while ABC does not specify currency for the $2 million tolls. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Kyle Sandilands sues ARN Media over termination of $100 million contract after on-air dispute with Jackie Henderson. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Kyle Sandilands filed legal action in the federal court against ARN Media and its subsidiary Commonwealth Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, on March 20, 2024, claiming termination of his $100 million contract was invalid due to no serious misconduct or breach of contract. Sandilands' contract with ARN was terminated on March 3, 2024, following a 20-minute on-air argument with co-host Jackie Henderson on February 20, 2024, where he mocked her interest in astrology and called her off with the fairies. ARN Media issued a 14-day notice to Sandilands to remedy the serious misconduct before terminating his contract, while Henderson's contract was terminated earlier due to her inability to work with Sandilands. Sandilands' base salary under the contract was $7.4 million annually, plus a $200,000 consultancy fee, $120,000 flight allowance, $500,000 in advertising revenue, and $2 million annual sub-licensing fees to his company Quasar Media. The contracts between ARN and Sandilands Henderson were signed in mid-2023 and were set to run until 2034, with a total value of $200 million, $100 million each. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC report that ARN disputes Sandilands' claims and intends to defend the proceedings, but The Guardian does not mention ARN's potential financial impact, while ABC's employment lawyer Faye Calderone suggests ARN may have acted opportunistically and prematurely. The Guardian and ABC both state that Henderson's contract was terminated before Sandilands, but The Guardian does not specify whether Henderson has launched legal action, while ABC and News.com.au imply she is considering legal action but have not confirmed it. The Guardian and ABC report that Sandilands' termination was based on an on-air argument, but News.com.au adds that Henderson's lawyers allegedly told ARN she could not work with Sandilands, which is not mentioned in The Guardian or ABC. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, News.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Stephen Colbert co-writing a new Lord of the Rings film titled Shadow of the Past. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Stephen Colbert will co-write a new Lord of the Rings film titled The Lord of the Rings, Shadow of the Past. The film will be produced by Peter Jackson, Philippe Arboyens, and Fran Walsh. The film is set 14 years after the events of The Lord of the Rings and follows Sam, Merry, and Pippin retracing their original adventure. Sam's daughter, Eleanor, discovers a long-buried secret explaining why the War of the Ring was nearly lost before it began. Colbert's The Late Show on CBS aired its last episode on May 21, 2024. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian Article 1 states Colbert's son is screenwriter Peter Colbert, while Guardian Article 3 and ABC refer to him as Peter McGee. Guardian Article 1 claims Jackson's trilogy grossed $5.9 billion combined with the Hobbit films, but ABC states the original trilogy alone grossed over $2.9 billion, later corrected to $4.1 billion in Guardian Article 3. Guardian Article 3 suggests The Lord of the Rings, The Hunt for Gollum is due next year, while Guardian Article 1 and ABC specify December 17, 2027. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian cricketer Georgia Volume 50 scores fastest T20 century versus West Indies in series sweep. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Georgia Volume 50 hit the third fastest T20 international century by an Australian woman in a match against West Indies. Volume 50 scored her century in 52 balls during Australia's T20 series against West Indies in St Vincent. Australia won the T20 series against West Indies with a 40-run victory via DL's method after rain interrupted the match. Vol's knock included 6 sixes and aggressive play against spinners, finishing with 101 runs in the third T20. The match was the last T20 before Australia's World Cup campaign in June 2026. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports rain stopped the West Indies chase at 61-3 after 10 overs, while ABC states it was at 3-61 after 10 overs. The Guardian lists Nicola Carey's unbeaten 24 off 20 and her push ahead of Talia McGrath in England, but ABC does not mention this detail. The Guardian includes Meg Lanning's 53-ball century versus Ireland, 2014, and Beth Mooney's 54-ball century as context, while ABC omits these specifics. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's waste sector faces diesel shortages threatening service disruptions and public health risks. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Waste collectors are receiving reduced diesel allocations, with one NSW operator told they would get 12,000 L instead of their usual 50,000 L fortnightly delivery, ABC, Newscomau. WA waste operators expect only about half their regular diesel allocations at next refill, ABC, Newscomau. Waste industry leaders are meeting with Assistant Environment Minister Josh Wilson in Canberra to advocate for priority fuel access, ABC, Newscomau. The federal government temporarily lowered diesel standards to allow imports from the US, Canada, and Europe, ABC, Newscomau. Waste collectors have been left off the priority fuel user list under the Liquid Fuel Emergency Act, ABC, Newscomau. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Gold Coast Mayor Tom Tate's Mar-a-Lago visit and Trump Tower development ethics controversy. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Gold Coast Mayor Tom Tate received hospitality from the Trump Organization during a February 12 to 14 visit to Mar-a-Lago, including meals, accommodation, and airport transfers valued over $500. The Trump Organization's gifts to CR Tate were disclosed in his latest Register of Interests, which requires declarations of gifts over $500 or multiple gifts totaling $500. The Trump Organization signed a $1.5 billion deal with Australian developer Altus Property Group, CEO David Young, for a Trump-branded 91-story tower in Surfers Paradise, Gold Coast, just days after Tate's Mar-a-Lago visit. The proposed Trump Tower in Surfers Paradise would include a 6-star resort hotel, 270 luxury apartments, a retail plaza, and a beach club, with claims it would be Australia's tallest building. Tate met with US President Donald Trump and Eric Trump during his Mar-a-Lago stay as part of a broader overseas trip that included Italy, the UAE, and the USA. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Tate was not asked for any assurances that he or the council would approve the Trump Tower, But Article 2 implies the Centre for Public Integrity argues his visit suggests he may have implicitly aligned with the project. Article 1 does not mention Tate's flights being paid for by ratepayers, while Article 2 explicitly states ratepayers paid for the mayor's flights. However, the exact cost was yet to be revealed. Article 1 does not quote Geoffrey Watson SC's opinion that Tate's Mar-a-Lago visit was inexplicable or surprising, while Article 2 includes this direct quote. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia and EU sign long-awaited free trade and security partnership after 8 years of negotiations. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement was signed on Tuesday after 8 years of negotiations, with leaders Anthony Albanese and Ursula von der Leyen finalising terms at Parliament House in Canberra. The deal is expected to create an annual economic benefit of $10 billion for Australia, lowering trade barriers between Australia and a market of 450 million EU consumers. The agreement includes a 30,000-tonne annual tariff-free quota for Australian beef exports to the EU, a 500% increase from current levels. The EU dropped demands for Australia to scrap its luxury car tax entirely, instead reaching a compromise on the tax. The Australia-EU Security and Defence Partnership was also finalised, focusing on defence industry cooperation, cybersecurity, and counter-terrorism. But not all outlets told the same story. The ABC states the EU's beef quota is well short of the 50,000 tonnes demanded by the NFF, while Newscomau describes it as at best, a few 10,000 tonnes more than current levels, with no explicit mention of 50,000 tonnes. The ABC reports the EU's beef quota is 30,000 tonnes annually, but Newscomau does not explicitly state this number, only that it is less than the 40,000 to 50,000 tonnes industry is demanding. The ABC mentions the EU's beef quota was influenced by political concerns from EU member nations due to the EU-Mercosur deal, a detail not included in Newscomau. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Air Canada CEO's bilingual language failure after fatal airport crash in New York. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 2 pilots were killed in a collision between an Air Canada Express flight, Flight 8646, and a Port Authority fire truck at New York's LaGuardia Airport on Sunday night, October 2024, exact date not specified but implied by context. The pilots killed were Antoine Forrest, 30, from Coteau-du-Lac, Quebec, and Mackenzie Gunther, 2023 graduate of Toronto's Seneca Polytechnic. Air Canada CEO Michael Rousseau released a 4-minute English-only condolence video on Monday, including only 2 French words, bonjour and merci. The CRJ-900 aircraft, operated by Jazz Aviation, an Air Canada regional partner, flew into LaGuardia from Montreal as Flight 8646 with 76 passengers and 4 crew members on board. The Runway Alert System, ASDEX, did not trigger before the crash because the fire truck was not equipped with a transponder. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states Rousseau addressed the Montreal Chamber of Commerce in English in 2021, prompting protests, while Newscomau does not mention this specific incident. The Guardian emphasizes Rousseau's lack of French fluency as a lack of judgment and compassion, while Newscomau frames it as a personal limitation with an apology focused on lessons over several years. The Guardian highlights Quebec Premier Legault's explicit demand for Rousseau's resignation, but Newscomau does not include this quote or demand. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Sydney grandfather's mistaken identity kidnapping and murder investigation. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Declan Jake Donnelly, 23, was arrested at a Seven Hills property on March 2024 and charged with murder and detain in company with intent to ransom occasioning bodily harm in relation to Chris Baghsarian's death. Chris Baghsarian, 85, was abducted from his North Ryde home on February 13 and his remains were found near a Pitt Town golf course on February 23. Gerard Andrews, 29, and Daniel Stevens, 24, were arrested and charged with Baghsarian's kidnapping and murder on March 2024 and remain in custody. Donnelly was captured on CCTV at Baghsarian's North Ryde home at the time of the abduction and near an abandoned Dural home where Baghsarian was allegedly tortured. Donnelly was refused bail and remanded in custody to appear in court again in May 2024. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC does not mention Donnelly updating his Facebook profile after Baghsarian's death, but SMH and Newscomer both report this. Newscomer states Donnelly was charged with acquire firearm without authority to do so, not mentioned in ABC or SMH. SMH describes Donnelly as contracted to kidnap Dimitri Stepanyan's father, relative of businessman, while ABC and Newscomer do not specify this exact phrasing. This story was covered by ABC News, news.com.au, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. NSW government considering banning strata manager commissions to cut apartment costs. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. NSW Productivity and Equality Commission report recommends banning commissions to strata managers, citing conflicts of interest and inflated costs. Commissions for strata managers in NSW can reach 20% of insurance premiums, with a $50,000 policy generating up to $10,000 in commissions, split between brokers and managers. Over 550 submissions were received during consultation on the report, with strong support from apartment owners for reform. More than 1 million people live in strata properties across NSW, and nearly half of all homes in Greater Sydney are expected to be strata titled by 2041. The Commission estimates scrapping commissions could create $333 million in benefits to apartment owners over 15 years through lower premiums and competitive pricing. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Actistrate's estimate of $300 million in benefits over 15 years, while the SMH reports $333 million in benefits over the same period. The Guardian states the Commission received over 550 submissions, but the SMH does not specify the exact number beyond more than 550. The ABC does not mention the specific figure of 20% commissions on insurance policies, mentioned in SMH and Guardian. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Disappearance of 4-year-old Gus Lamont from South Australian Outback Station. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Gus Lamont was last seen on September 27, 2025, at Oak Park Station near Yunta, South Australia, around 5 p.m. playing on a mound of dirt. His disappearance was reported to police approximately 3 hours later by his grandmother, Josie Murray, on October 1, 2025. The 60,000-hectare Oak Park Station was searched extensively by police, volunteers, drones, and Aboriginal trackers, with no evidence found. In February 2026, police declared Gus's disappearance a major crime and ruled out theories that he wandered off or was abducted. A suspect residing at the station was identified in February 2026, but no arrests have been made. Police seized items including a car and electronic devices. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states police returned to the property in May 2026 due to rainfall, but ABC does not mention this specific return. News Kamau reports police ruled out Gus's parents as suspects in February 2026, while ABC does not explicitly state this timeline for the ruling. ABC describes Gus as playing in the sand with a shovel, while News Kamau specifies he was playing on a mound of dirt. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's 2026 daylight saving transition dates and regional clock changes. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Daylight saving in Australia ends on the first Sunday of April annually. In 2026, daylight saving will end on Sunday, April 5th in most Australian states and territories. Clocks will move back 1 hour at 3 a.m. local time to 2 a.m. on the end date, giving people an extra hour of sleep. Daylight saving applies to most states and territories in Australia, exact regions not specified but implied. Daylight saving in Australia begins again on Sunday, October 4, 2026. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian does not mention Easter Sunday alignment, while ABC explicitly states it ends on Easter Sunday 2026. ABC provides comparative details about US and UK daylight saving rules, which are not mentioned in The Guardian. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump criticizes Australia's lack of support in Iran conflict. Albanese defends government stance and de-escalation efforts. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump extended Iran's deadline to reopen the Strait of Hormuz until April 6, 2026, pausing strikes on Iranian energy plants for 10 days, ABC, SMH, THEJ. Iran's initial response to the US peace proposal was described as one-sided and unfair by a senior Iranian official, ABC. Australia provided advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles to the UAE at its request, SMH, THEJ. Anthony Albanese stated Australia was not consulted before the US military action in Iran and that the US made its own decisions, ABC, SMH, THEJ. Trump criticized Australia's role in the conflict, calling it not great and saying he was surprised by its lack of involvement, SMH, THEJ. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Trump suggested Iran allow 10 oil tankers to transit the strait as a goodwill gesture, but SMH and THEJ do not mention this specific proposal. SMH and THEJ state Trump criticized Australia for not assisting sufficiently, while ABC notes Australia provided wedgetail aircraft to the UAE, though this is also mentioned in SMH THEJ. ABC reports Iran's initial response was one-sided and unfair, but no other source confirms this exact phrasing from a senior Iranian official. This story was covered by ABC News, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 2 teenagers die after motorbike crash with bus on Sydney's restricted transitway. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 2 teenage boys, 15-year-old rider and 14-year-old passenger, died after a motorbike collision with a bus on the Liverpool Parramatta Transitway, T-Way, near Bosley Park, Sydney, around 7:10 p.m. on Monday. The motorbike became wedged under the bus at Restwell Road, Bosley Park, with no injuries to bus passengers, but the 48-year-old driver was taken to hospital for mandatory testing. Fairfield City Council Mayor Frank Carbone has repeatedly called for stricter enforcement of the T-Way's restrictions on motorbikes and e-bikes, citing recent near-misses and incidents. Police are investigating the crash and have asked for witnesses, including dashcam footage or CCTV, to come forward. The crash occurred on a restricted transitway designated for buses and emergency vehicles only. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the boys were riding a petrol trail bike, while SMH initially suggests the crash may have involved e-bikes without clear confirmation. ABC explicitly names the boys' ages as 15 and 14, while SMH does not specify ages beyond teenage boys. ABC reports Mayor Carbone wrote to Premier Minns this month but had not received a response, while SMH does not mention this detail. This story was covered by ABC News and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's 6-month ban on Iranian visitor visa holders amid regional conflict. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke announced a 6-month ban on Iranian visitor visa, subclass 600, holders from entering Australia, effective from Thursday the 15th of March, 2024. The ban applies to over 7,000 Iranian nationals who already hold valid visitor visas but are outside Australia, blocking their entry for 6 months. The legislation allowing temporary visa bans was passed in Parliament on the 14th of March, 2024, with less than 1 hour of debate, and received support from the coalition. Iranian parents of Australian citizens will receive sympathetic consideration for entry, with permitted travel certificates available on a case-by-case basis. The ban was justified by concerns that some Iranian visa holders may be unable or unwilling to return to Iran due to the ongoing conflict, risking overstaying visas. But not all outlets told the same story. The ABC and Guardian report that only 2 Iranian women's football team members remain in Australia, but the Newscom article states only 2 players ultimately followed through and remained in Australia, implying 5 returned, which contradicts the ABC Guardian's 7 offered, 5 changed their minds. The ABC and Guardian described the ban as applying to over 7,000 Iranian visa holders, while Newscom Australia states more than 7,200 temporary visa holders within Iran. The latter may include broader visa types beyond subclass 600. The ABC and Guardian emphasize the ban's racist implications, but Newscom Australia does not explicitly use the term racist, instead framing it as a controversial or hypocritical measure. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. IOC bans transgender women from female Olympic events via SRY gene testing starting 2028. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The IOC announced a ban on transgender women competing in female Olympic events starting the 2028 Los Angeles Games, effective immediately for future Olympics. The new policy mandates a one-time SRY gene test, via saliva, cheek swab, or blood, to determine biological sex for female category eligibility. IOC President Kirsty Coventry stated the decision is based on scientific evidence showing males retain a performance advantage, 10 to 12% in running swimming, 20% plus in throwing jumping, greater than 100% in explosive power events, even after testosterone suppression. New Zealand's Laurel Hubbard was the first openly transgender athlete to compete at the Olympics, Tokyo 2021, in a different gender category to her birth sex. The IOC's 2021 framework on fairness, inclusion, and non-discrimination was reversed by Kirsty Coventry's leadership, scrapping prior guidance allowing transgender women to compete. But not all outlets told the same story. The IOC claims the SRY gene test is unintrusive and highly accurate, but medical experts like Dr. Ada Chung and Professor Paula Gerber call it unreliable and reductive. The Guardian reports the IOC's policy was influenced by US President Donald Trump's anti-trans policies, while ABC and the IOC explicitly state Kirsty Coventry prioritized the issue independently of Trump's actions. The Guardian notes the IOC's 2021 framework was scrapped with no public consultation, whereas ABC and the IOC frame it as a U-turn based on new scientific evidence and athlete surveys. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. NSW introduces laws to crush illegal high-speed e-bikes amid safety concerns and gambling reform delays. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. NSW government will introduce legislation to seize and crush e-bikes operating over 25 km per hour, with roadside dyno units for speed testing. Transport Minister John Graham stated if it behaves like a motorbike, it's probably illegal and could end up in the crusher. A 2-day safety blitz in NSW last week issued 170 fines for illegal e-bikes. Independent MP Kate Cheney plans to introduce a private member's bill for a gambling ad ban, marking 1,000 days since Peter Murphy's report. The e-Safety Commissioner warned AI companion chatbots lack safeguards for children, including age verification and self-harm support. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports NSW's minimum e-bike age is undecided between 12 and 16, while Newscom Australia does not mention an age restriction for e-bikes. The Guardian states Victorian schools will remain open but with limited supervision, while Newscom Australia does not cover the Victorian teacher strike. The Guardian mentions fuel price support measures for truck drivers, but Newscom Australia does not reference this policy. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.